Hello everyone. Today I'm continuing my adventure in France, and I'm also beginning a new series for the channel, Iconic Cars. Vehicles which have changed the face of motoring, even for people that have never touched, driven or seen one of the vehicles being featured. What cars are going to be in this series? Well, we'll just have to see how things go, because as always for channels the size of mine, luck plays as big a part as anything else. But this is car number one, and I think we're going to struggle to find a vehicle more iconic than the Volkswagen Beetle. And let's be honest here, for a vehicle that we all know was designed at the behest of everyone's favourite dictator to then become the darling child of the flower power movement, it's got to be something pretty special. And I think really the Beetle's success has been in its simplicity. Front-wheel drive may be all the rage now for vehicles that have got economy as a priority, but when this car was conceived, in the 1930s no less, the idea of compacting your entire drivetrain into one small lump and then sticking it at the back of the car was revolutionary. It allowed you to make a car that was much smaller yet still practical. You can fit a surprising amount of stuff under here and of course be very, very cheap to manufacture. The air-cooled engine again was the result of engineering expediency. No water being pumped around the car means no water pump, no pipes to split and burst. It just keeps things simple, and that of course means that any semi-skilled home mechanic is going to have a much better chance of keeping these things running. If you want to be entertained, check out the video of someone changing a fan belt on one of these things while it's still running. Now, by whatever metric you use, this has been an incredibly successful car, and it holds many production records which are unlikely to ever be broken. Number sold, over 21.5 million. Production period, 65 years. From 1938 to 2003. And bear in mind, there were no real major revisions to the chassis or engine during that period. Other cars have had multiple generations over a fraction of the time, and that's very important, and it helps, in my mind, to solidify this car's truly iconic status. Plus, there's almost no other car I can think of which has sired itself an almost as iconic vehicle, in this case the Porsche 911. Now, Porsche fans may shy away from it, but the truth of the matter is that that car and this are directly related, and there's no shame in that. It goes to show how inherently right, or if you don't like it wrong, the platform was. Now, this particular vehicle, a very cute looking white Cabriolet, was manufactured by Carmen, yes, the same people that made the very nice Ghia, in 1978. It was probably done using a Mexican or possibly Brazilian chassis, and it was acquired by this family in 1984. Now, something I really should tell you guys. First off, my good friend Laurie is going to be very upset about the fact that I'm driving one of these today. But secondly, I've never actually done it. In fact, I've never even been a passenger in one of these. So I'm really, really keen to see just how it drives. Let's get out there. Unlike the last car I drove, not off to quite a slicker beginning, but let's hope that improves as I get used to it. Let's wait for the modern car. Now, you can probably see, I can see the camera shaking. In a lot of recent videos, I've had the camera shake a little more than the car. Yeah, I know. Yep. The French are so understanding when they're on the roads. They really are, especially if people driving older vehicles. You know, it's so nice. Who am I kidding? They're arseholes. Well, visibility in this is not too bad. Actually, on the move, it's very, very pleasant. Once you've got a little bit of revs in that engine, it smooths out completely. Now, the boxer motor, in theory, is perfectly balanced naturally. It's air-cooled, very light engine. Oh, didn't like that. Oh yeah, okay. Still getting used to the car, It's a very different experience. So a little bit about this particular car. This is a 1978 car. In Beetle terms, it's both young and old. If you think about it, the car had been in production by this time for, well, 40 years. It officially being introduced in around 1938. Well, this one was used for, well, family duty. It took Marie's children to school. She used it to go to work. It did everything for them. I suppose you can understand why. It's fairly cheap to run. Parts are very easily available, of course. It's a benefit of having made so many. All right, don't stop. Try not to stop. Try not to stop. Okay. Trying to keep my momentum going here. Car on carbs. Now, the last time I drove anything of roughly this vintage or type was a Trabant that I drove in Berlin. So this is actually in quite a different experience. This has double the number of cylinders, more than double the capacity, double the number of strokes as well. The Trabi is a 2-stroke. Now, this is the second car that I've driven this week, and I chose this because after the Z1, it's the thing most close to a modern vehicle to drive. That is the theory. And in truth, all of the controls are exactly where I would expect to find them. I'm just getting used to their weightings, what the car does and doesn't like doing, all that kind of stuff. I know that the brakes on this car are not going to be very good. Like any old car, it's not particularly happy when it's cold, and I'm just getting used to what it really likes to do. Oh, we're in third. Gear change is actually super light, very vague. It doesn't help that the picture of it down here has got it all at angles. Also doesn't help, I'm in rush hour traffic in France, and as you heard earlier, the French are not understanding of other road users who just don't want to get a move on. The official 0 to 60 time of this car is something like 18 seconds. I have absolutely no intention of testing the performance today whatsoever. I'm simply here to enjoy the drive, and enjoy it I'm beginning to. 4 speeds, manual. They did do an automatic. I can't imagine that that'll be very much fun. I can't see anything out the side mirrors, to be quite honest. I should probably fix that. There we go, I can see a little bit out the side mirror now. Safety first and all that. I'll admit, slightly scared right now. Slightly scared. This is somebody's prized possession. I'm driving it around somewhere that I know only very vaguely, with other road users who I know are absolutely awful, and of course I'm trying to talk to you guys at the same time, but that's my job, so I'm gonna do the best damn job of it that I can. So, instrumentation, dead simple. There's a cute little clock down here, which looks like Grandpa's basically taken his bedside alarm clock and glued it to the dash of the car, which is probably what some old German fellow did once upon a time. I suspect this speedo may be very optimistic, because it just went from 60 to 80k like I was in a 911 Turbo. Now people will of course always compare 911s to these, usually if they don't like the 911. The truth is there is of course a fairly direct family lineage, the most obvious one being the Porsche 356, and the 911 was then a much sportier evolution of that. So things like the floor hinged pedals I'm very familiar with because I've driven a number of air-cooled Porsches that have the same setup, and it's really no problem for me. They're a little bit weird and funky, but I get used to them. Like in the corners, taking it quite easily. There's actually quite a bit of texture through the steering wheel. Actually, the car's not rolling about as much as I thought that it might. I'm quite impressed. I suspect actually if I really knew what I was doing, I could probably take these corners much quicker than I actually am. But I'm going to be satisfied with what I'm doing for now. The Audi that was up my arse in town has actually dropped back quite a way. Perhaps he's worrying about whatever might happen, and maybe he thinks I'm going to drop one of these cameras off him like some sort of Dick Dastardly ploy. The sound from that flat 4 is actually really quite sweet. It picks up and pulls well enough. I've got up to the Frenchie's new 80 km/h rural limit easily enough. I can see a little bit of bonnet. And to be fair, most of what I can see is the camera I've got there. Hello. I'm very close to this door. I'm very conscious of that and the fact that it is very thin. This car has a Nardi steering wheel in it, but a very special history. The gentleman that owns this car, or the father of the family as it were, has a very long connection to the automobile industry, and he and his family have been working in the automobile industry for several generations. And he was gifted this steering wheel by Mr. Nardi himself. And it has this, one might almost call it a crude engraving in it. E. Nardi. There you go. That's quite special. If you looked at it, you might think that the cars this family have in their collection were all acquired in a short period. Actually, there are a lifetime's worth of vehicles they've simply felt were too good to throw away. So far, I'm quite impressed. I've been a passenger in one of the other vehicles I hope to drive, and I must confess it carried far more speed than I considered a vehicle of that age ever could. I have found when driving certain older cars that actually sometimes being kind to them is not being kind at all, if that makes any sort of sense. Now these seats should be familiar to anybody that's seen an early Golf, because they are apparently exactly the same thing. Now, would I want to do a long trip in this car? No, not at all. I think I'd be quite scared about it. Could you do a long trip in this car? Yes, I'm sure you could. Like I say, I've not taken it up to motorway speeds, but when the car's quoted top speed is only about 80, I don't think it's very kind for the thing to sit at basically max capacity all the time. Certainly not when it's a warm day like today. I know it doesn't look very bright, but it's been 30 degrees earlier today. It's just not kind on the poor car. However, driving it now is becoming, with every gear change, with every application of the throttle, the charm of the thing is starting to work its way into me. I mean, if I look down here, I mean, this thing is hilariously old. It's awful. I suspect even in the 1970s, this is a very outdated, old-fashioned and cheap-looking cockpit. But that wasn't really, that was never the point. It was never meant to be a flashy car. This is transport for the masses. It's a car for whom many, I suppose your choice was one of these or walking. And this is not a bad way to travel. I know right now, my dear friend and assistant Laurie is going to be somewhat incandescent, because I know top on his list of vehicles he absolutely, definitely, positively wants to own is one of these. Whether it's convertible he wants or not, I couldn't say. But he really lusts after them. Unfortunately, they're quite pricey. It's a beautiful view out there. I don't know how much of it you guys can appreciate from this, but it's really quite stunning around here. I'm so lucky for the channel to have brought me here. It'd be somewhat disingenuous to say that YouTube is my job, because it simply doesn't bring enough to cover me at the moment, but it is what I spend most of my time doing. I am a lucky man. If only there was a little less traffic, because I'd probably drive this thing even slower. It seems to be the pace it's happy with. I think it's quite funny, really, that the car was adopted and loved by the hippie movement so much. But in this series, I want to be looking at iconic cars. And really, no matter how you class it, can people identify if you show them a picture? Yes. Did they make heaps of them? Yes. Are loads of them still on the road? Yes. Were they all things to all people? Yes. The Beetle is every inch an iconic car. It truly is. And it's not actually that bad to drive. I didn't have much fun with it in town, granted, but the very first time I've even sat in an old Beetle, let alone driven one. What other cars do you think would be in the same category as this? I think of this period, let's call this a 60s car, okay? This one is from the 70s, I know, but let's call this a 60s car. You'd have this, you'd have the Fiat 500, you'd have the Mini. What else would you have? I don't know. To me, they're like a holy trinity of accessible cars for the everyman. If you could pick only one of those, which would you pick? I'd love to know. Okay. Gonna navigate my way back through town now. So wish me luck, everybody. In the meantime, I want to say thank you very much for watching. Please comment below. Give me a thumbs up. I mean, come on. I'm driving a Beetle on a side of the car I'm not used to, on a side of the road I'm not used to, and I'm smiling. That's got to be worth a thumbs up. Thank you again, and thank you to Marie and the family for letting me sample this little gem from their collection. There is, I assure you, plenty more to come. Bye-bye.